Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Nick Yuskevich here of Daily Fantasy Winners. It is week 9 of the NFL season, and for this episode, I'm going to give you my top plays at each position in daily fantasy for NFL this weekend at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and defense as well. And I'll give you my favorite under the radar plays kind of at each position as well. So to get us started here at quarterback, we're going to dive right into Aaron Rodgers. It's pretty obvious why Aaron Rodgers would be considered the best quarterback this weekend. He easily, as far as the team projection goes, the Packers are the highest this weekend at 31 points. The Colts defense certainly is not very good, to say the least. Vontae Davis, easily Indianapolis' best corner, may not play this weekend as well. Per Mike Chappell on Twitter, he's visiting a specialist on Saturday to see if he can be cleared for the game this weekend, but he is certainly questionable, to say the least, this weekend. And then as far as the Packers offense goes, their running game is still an issue. Niall Davis was obviously cut, and then Don Jackson's on the roster. But, we have to remember this guy was a practice squad guy, and they really haven't been playing him. They've been a little reluctant to play him, certainly, since he's been bumped up to the 53-man roster. Ty Montgomery, it's really tough kind of seeing what his ultimate status is going to be and how much he's going to play. I'm not an expert on the sickle cell trait thing. I don't know as far as that goes, but I'd have to think, just given their running back options and the health of their team overall right now, I'd have to think Ty Montgomery is going to play and probably get the majority of snaps there, just based on looking at the roster and what they have available there and how effective Ty Montgomery has been at the running back position. But even so, he will do most of his damage in the passing game. Certainly, he catches a lot of balls out of the backfield, or he starts in the backfield and then he motions out wide. And obviously, Aaron Rodgers has also been running the ball a lot more, certainly, because of the banged up running game. So, obviously, several factors going for Aaron Rodgers here this weekend. Don't overthink this one too much as far as the top play at quarterback this week, regardless of price. Just who's going to give you the most fantasy points at quarterback. As far as who I think for the under the radar plays at quarterback, Colin Kaepernick. No doubt about it for me on this one, and actually would not surprise me if he was right there with Aaron Rodgers for most fantasy points this week. So Kaepernick, there are a bunch of reasons why. Kaepernick really was made for the Chip Kelly offense. Kaepernick has been, in his couple starts so far, has been running the ball eight or nine times per game, which is easily the best of any quarterback this season. That's also ahead of pace of how many times Kaepernick was keeping it when he was doing, some of the zone read stuff and taking off as a runner in Jim Harbaugh's offense when he was coaching the San Francisco 49ers. He's also Kaepernick just through a couple games, and he's got great yards per carry as well, going back to 2014, 2013 as well. But I'll just say he is averaging 8.8 yards per carry, and he's going to have a lot of opportunities this game for a rushing TD and a lot more passing TDs. And the reason because of this is this game should be a shootout, and because they're facing the New Orleans Saints. I know Kaepernick's accuracy really hasn't been that good this year. It's been pretty poor, actually, just to be fair. But we have to remember the 49ers wide receiver core is probably one of the worst in the NFL. Now they get the New Orleans Saints, which is one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. And, if Kaepernick does struggle some with accuracy in this game, like if he completes under 50% of his passes in this game, I will be absolutely shocked. And then I will certainly be absolutely concerned about his future a little bit, I guess. Maybe I hate to say that on just one game, but this is a matchup that's perfectly made for Kaepernick. He has to show better than what he's shown in the first couple games since he's became the starter. But we just have to remember there is massive putting aside just the passing for a moment here, there is just massive upside here from the running standpoint. And you remember, like, Cam Newton is now considered the top fantasy quarterback, generally speaking, each week. Maybe not quite as much recently, just because he struggled a little bit and been a little bit banged up as well, and hasn't been running it quite as much. But he was considered the number one fantasy quarterback coming into this year, and he was last year, certainly because of his running ability and the rushing touchdowns. And obviously, if you played college football daily fantasy in the past, you'll know of how many running quarterbacks there are, of how much more how valuable they really are in comparison to some of the pocket passers, especially when they're not up-tempo offenses. I mean, San Francisco, they move very fast. Kaepernick's got the running ability, obviously. Kaepernick can make up for, if Kaepernick, even if he only completes 50 to 55% of his passes instead of a quarterback that would normally complete 65% against the Saints, he will make up for it easily by far and then some against a Saints defense. And so, right now, Kaepernick, I really believe that he will get at least 20 fantasy points in this game. He's probably your best value in DFS this weekend. I know he hasn't been as good the last 2 weeks, but this is just a significantly better matchup, and you should not be afraid to play him. So moving on to running back, and this is my top play for running back this week. It is Devontae Booker. And just moving over to show you here, if you look at the Google Doc I have pulled up, look at column H right here. Under week 8, and it'll say that Devontae Booker played 83% of snaps last week, and that is a lot considering he suffered a shoulder injury and he missed, I believe it was a series at least, early on in that game, because I know he got dinged up a little bit, and he was obviously playing with a hurt shoulder throughout the rest of the game. So Booker is going to get a lot of volume in this game. Against the Oakland Raiders. He will play as much as David Johnson or Le'Veon Bell would in terms of a snap count percentage. And Booker has fantastic PPR value as well as obviously a running, as long as with the running game as well, of course. And then as far as the matchup goes, Oakland is the worst defense in yards per play allowed this year, easily. They are 30th in rush defense, allowing 4.8 yards per carry. And they were 32nd actually last week and dead last as far as yards per carry allowed in the running game specifically. Before they faced the banged up Tampa Bay running game. And obviously, we saw with Jacquizz Rodgers, he played actually through that game with a sprained foot. So that actually helped Oakland's rush defense statistics just a little bit to move from dead last to 30th. But still, it's obviously very bad. And right now, Denver, a team that generally has good run blocking this year. Booker's got all the volume and this is against one of the worst rush defenses. I mean, this is about as good a matchup as you can have. I will actually be shocked if Booker is not the best running back this week in fantasy overall. So. Moving on to under the radar, and I know this sounds a little weird that I'm saying this under the radar for this, but from an ownership percentage, and I always see this, it seems like each week, and he goes a little bit under-owned. Not so much last week, I don't think it was against the Browns, but in any case, this is Matt Forte. I do feel like he's going a little bit under the radar this week just based upon seeing some of the other content that's out there, seeing ownership percentage generally speaking each week, and so anyways, I'll just dive right into this. If you're concerned about snap count percentage for Matt Forte, here's the deal. I'm going to scroll down here to the Jets' snap counts here with the running backs. But in any case, here's the deal. Forte is going to play. I mean, he's been doing this all year. He's played pretty much every first and second down all season. He'll also play a little bit of third downs and shorter yard situations and more when the Jets are leading. And then when you look at Bilal Powell, he plays almost always on third down and is more often used as a pass protector. Also, this is definitely more of a game flow thing, and that's probably the biggest thing here. When the Jets are trailing by a lot and they're in more passing situations, that's more when Bilal Powell comes into the game because, one, they're trying to keep Forte, because they're trying to keep Forte's reps down a little bit when they don't really need him. And as you've seen all year, they've been listing him as questionable throughout the week, and they've just been limiting him in practice, and they're trying to protect him a little bit. So that's why when you're seeing these games where the Jets get blown out, they're passing the ball a little bit more, and they're just trying to protect Forte, and Powell's not a bad pass catcher at all. Forte still catches balls out of the backfield. It's just more when it's a competitive game or when the Jets are leading and they want Forte to put the game away, essentially. So it's not quite as good a PPR value for Forte as to when he was in Chicago, but it's still pretty good in comparison to the average running back. And you just take a look at even last week in a game at the Browns, the Jets fell behind 20-7 with Forte receiving 59% of snaps in comparison to Bilal Powell at 42% last week. Forte still got 25 carries and a couple of touchdowns, and that's obviously a crucial thing to know as well. Matt Forte will always get the goal line work. So this week, looking at the Dolphins, even though the Jets are slight underdogs to the Dolphins, Miami's got a very poor rush defense, and they are very turnover prone as well. Jets could very easily have some great field position in this game, and it's a great matchup against the run. And then looking at the Dolphins, also just for a second here, their success this year offensively has been when they've been able to run the ball successfully with JJ, and the Jets have one of the best rush defenses in the NFL, and I think this matchup actually does suit the Jets pretty well, and I'd just be shocked if the Jets Jets were getting their butts kicked in this game. That would very much shock me. I mean, sometimes those happen in 3-point spreads. Obviously, it can happen to anybody, but this is a matchup where I would just really be shocked if the Dolphins ran away with it, and the Jets found themselves in a big hole. They would have to have like a really, really bad game from Ryan Fitzpatrick. So in any case, this is going to force the Jets. I think this is another good situation for Forte. And again, I know it's not exactly under the radar here per se in some people's eyes, but in comparison to ownership percentages, what we've seen in some of the way other running backs are talked about, I'm a little surprised that Forte is still not getting as much love. And I think the snap count is scaring people a little bit, but Powell really is only in these games when they're trailing big, and he's used as a pass protector more than Matt Forte is. So, let's see here. And yeah, Forte, by the way, let's throw this lastly. And I honestly, if Forte does, or if the Jets do end up playing with the lead in this game, you will see Matt Forte get about 80% of snaps, just like you saw, as you can see in the sheet here in week 7. Forte got, where is it right there? 84% to Powell's 13%. That's obviously the upside, even more so you're playing with there in a game anytime you do play Matt Forte. So, and then lastly, I'll just throw this in as a bonus pick just because we now know that Spencer Ware is officially ruled out. Doing this on a Friday afternoon, we just found out that Ware has been ruled out with a concussion. So Charkandrick West is going to play nearly every snap in this game, and they're big favorites against the Jaguars. Just play him. Just do not overthink that one whatsoever. West is definitely a great pick to go with there. Let's move on to Indianapolis. For the top wide receiver, and that's T.Y. Hilton. A lot of people are expecting me to say probably Antonio Brown, and a lot of people are thinking Antonio Brown. However, I will say that Brown has only averaged 5 catches and 65.5 receiving yards per game, and he only has 1 total touchdown in 13 matchups against Baltimore in Antonio Brown's career, which is really not very good. I know some of that is because Brown, wasn't the superstar he is right now, so you're not necessarily comparing apples to apples. But at the same time, Baltimore's usually done pretty well against Antonio Brown in historically. And Jimmy Smith is Baltimore's best corner, and I don't know if they'll shadow him necessarily, but Baltimore's pass defense, while it was really bad last year, and it is still not elite this year by any means. That was not mean. I should. Funny, I said elite there, and I'm talking about Baltimore. I did not mean to do that, but I just did. It is still Baltimore's pass defense is much improved now that they're healthy this year, and Jimmy Smith is back. So I do believe that helps Baltimore's pass defense just overall, and that's why it'll help against Antonio Brown a little bit this week. Also, take a look at Ben Roethlisberger. Even if he does play this weekend, Pittsburgh's going to do everything in their power to protect him, since the Ravens want to hit him more. And I'm not saying about dirty necessarily. I'm just saying that Baltimore wants to be as physical and go after Steelers players, and that's just always a war basically between these two teams. And the Ravens will hit him. They're known to go after him big time, and they are very blitz heavy, and they will attack him big time. And so basically, I bring this up because if Ben does play in this game, because he could play in this game, not 100%, because this is a huge divisional game. Now that the Steelers have lost a couple more games and this division race got a little bit tighter, this is obviously a huge game, and it could come down to a tiebreaker scenario for who wins the AFC North. You never know. So the Steelers could very well end up playing Ben this weekend, not 100%, and just doing everything they can to protect him. So at the end of the day, I just don't think we're going to see as many big shots downfield from Ben if he does play, and there's a reason why the over-under in this game is setting at 43.5. This is a pretty low over-under. But back to TY, because that's where I started with, and I just kind of wanted to show you why I'm pumping the brakes a little bit on Antonio this weekend. But back to TY. Number 1, wide receivers have done extremely well against Green Bay this season. The Packers have one of the best rush defenses in the NFL, and they have a poor pass defense and yards per play allowed. The Colts are going to have to throw a lot in this game, especially since they'll be forced to keep up with the Packers offense. And then, you might think, does having Dante Moncrief and Dwayne Allen hurt just a little bit? Yeah, it does, to be fair. But T.Y. has obviously still had outstanding games with them on the field, and this matchup is just too good. The pros by far outweigh the cons in this situation. T.Y. would be shocked if he does not get at least 20 fantasy points in this game. This is about as great of a matchup as you could possibly have if you're T.Y. And I'm really not concerned about his hamstring issue. I'm not concerned about that at all. I think he'll be fine. So, any case, that might actually help his ownership a little bit in GPPs as well. So moving on to the under the radar play. And now this one is, you might question a little bit about being under the radar, but he's not being talked about very much at all this week, it seems like. And he was a stud early on in the year. And that is Stephon Diggs of the Vikings. The matchup is there. I understand from it not being under the radar just because it's the Lions. They have one of the worst, defenses in the NFL this year. The Vikings are 6-point favorites at home, and we obviously know about Diggs. It's not like this is some guy coming out of nowhere. But here's the thing: this is just kind of a recency bias thing. Diggs had 2 monster games to start the year, but since that he followed up with receiving performances of 40, 47, and 18 yards. Like that's pretty bad, obviously. Not to mention he missed a week and they're injured, so he kind of fell off the map there for a little bit. And we obviously know from a public perception how much recency bias, plays a big role. This is why, like, for example, I was promoting Golden Tate still, even though Marvin Jones was completely destroying him in terms of production the first couple of weeks. The targets were there and it was a great buy low option. Now we're seeing Golden Tate. He's out targeting Marvin Jones over the last few weeks. It's just, it's a slightly different example, but it's still to say, like, there's things with recency bias that everybody seems to jump on always still, and people are very reactionary, and it's something you can always take advantage of, and NFL is one of the best sports you can take advantage of in it. And so with Stephon Diggs, obviously for people that are paying closer attention, yes, he did rally back in Monday Night Football I think it's 76 yards receiving and a touchdown against the Bears, but a lot of that was in garbage time, and most of the focus right now is on how bad the Vikings offense is, because it is extremely banged up and they have offensive issues. There's no doubt about it. But that's really where the main focus is that the offense is bad, and it's like Stephon Diggs just really isn't on the top of people's list, and he's just really cheap now kind of as a result. Diggs didn't all of a sudden just lose his talent out of nowhere, obviously. So yeah, very reasonably priced wide receiver, and there are also a lot of reasonably priced wide receivers around him. So I just don't think his ownership is going to be very high. It's a perfect matchup, and it's a much better matchup than what the Vikings have been having the last few weeks. This is pretty much a perfect opportunity for Diggs to go over 100 yards this week. So really good upside here. Let's move on to tight end. The top pick at tight end is Greg Olsen. I mean, this should be obvious, like duh, but I know there's a lot of buzz about Kyle Rudolph, so I actually was just going to touch on Rudolph for a second just to say why I'm not saying Rudolph. I'm aware this is against the Lions defense, and like how bad the Lions defense is against tight ends in particular, and Bradford loves going to Rudolph in the red zone. I recognize all of that. But Rudolph always does play on the line of scrimmage, and he pretty much only does shorter routes. You're probably going to see Rudolph get at least 5 or 6 receptions, maybe 7 or something like that, but he's not going to get you near 100 yards receiving. He's only averaging, I believe it's like 6.8 yards per reception around there. It's not very much. And so he basically he's pretty touchdown reliant for what you need to get out of Rudolph, just generally speaking. In cash formats, it's not as big of a deal, obviously, because he's cheaper, obviously, than Greg Olsen. But especially in GPP formats, Rudolph's going to be owned a lot, and you're really banking on a few touchdowns to make it worth your while. And I think it's too risky to do in GPPs personally. I actually would, if you're doing GPP lineups out there, I would actually recommend a fade of Rudolph in this game. It's really not a bad idea for how much I think he'll be owned. But anyways, meanwhile, looking at Greg Olsen, though, because he is my top play here at tight end, he lines up as a receiver at times, and he stretches the field a lot more. He's averaging like over 10 yards per reception, I believe it is this year, or close to it. He's not nearly as touchdown dependent, and he obviously is a threat to get you like 100 yards receiving in this game. So I would just look at Kyle Rudolph more on the Travis Kelce level as opposed to the Greg Olsen level, because I recognize Rudolph is got a good matchup here, but I just would not go too overboard here with Rudolph this week. And obviously, Jordan Reed and Rob Gronkowski are on bye, so they're not in the conversation for this week specifically. Moving on to a tight end under the radar. Antonio Gates. Hunter Henry has been ruled out. So you're probably looking at Antonio Gates' snap counts and all the updates you get from different websites and just checking data and seeing that, yeah, Antonio Gates' snap counts have not been good. But you have to recognize this. Not only is Hunter Henry out, Gates when he comes into the game, it's almost always on passing downs, and he's almost always running passing routes. So even though the snap count isn't there, his production as far as or his opportunities, I should say, are better than you might think. And obviously with the uptick in snaps the Gates should get with Hunter Henry being out, that should only be even better, obviously, for Antonio Gates. Taking a look at the matchup versus the Tennessee Titans, they do have a solid rush defense and a weak pass defense. The Titans have been thrown on the second most by opponents this year. Opponents love attacking Tennessee through the air. The Chargers, despite playing with a lead in pretty much in every game this year, you should realize that the Chargers still throw it 61% of the time. So even though the Chargers have claimed they want to be more balanced, and yes, Melvin Gordon's scoring touchdowns, the Chargers are still pretty pass heavy normally. And so, and they're not like the biggest pass heavy team in the league, but they throw it more than you might think. I will just put it that way. They're around top 10 or so in the league. So in any case, there's a lot of perception out there that as far as Antonio Gates has slowed down quite a bit, and he's in his final years, and he just doesn't have it as much. Just recognize that this matchup really is too good to pass up, because you got the matchup with the Titans. The Chargers are projected for quite a few points, and Hunter Henry being out, it's kind of a perfect situation here. And Gates might go a little bit underused here, even though that people will take note of Hunter Henry being out. It's just kind of a perfect storm here, and I think Gates really is worth a kind of that under the radar, I guess, play, if you will, just a little bit. As far as defense goes, the top defense is the Chiefs. This should be pretty obvious to people just by looking at spreads, the lines of the game. The Jaguars are only projected for 18.5 points. The Chiefs are 7-point favorites at home. And looking at a little bit deeper, the Jaguars are last in turnover margin, and the Chiefs are second in turnover margin. Yes, of course, there's luck in that. I know there's turnover variance, obviously. But at the same time, the Chiefs are an aggressive defense, and Bortles with this offense has just been really inaccurate and ineffective this year. So I would be shocked if the Chiefs didn't win the turnover margin in this game the way this is set up. And the only downside I'll just say to this matchup, just to give a full disclosure on this, is that the Chiefs are mediocre in sacking people this year, and the Jags are only average this year in allowing sacks. But just given how much the Jags are going to have to pass in this game, the upside is there overall, and the Chiefs have really good special teams as well. So it's not like the perfect top play matchup, but considering the options we have this week, I do believe the Chiefs should be projected for the most points this week. As far as GPP goes, or under the radar, I should say, because this is really going to go for GPP only as far as this pick goes. It's the Packers, actually. Yeah, it's the Packers. And I know this kind of goes against what I said about T.Y. Hilton earlier, and this game could be high scoring, so this is definitely GPP only again. But like I said earlier, the Colts are going to be passing the ball a lot in this game. And the big thing here is the Colts have allowed the most sacks this year with 31. The next team on that list is 25, has allowed 25. So you've got a 6-sack differential between the number 1 and the number 2 team, which is a huge gap. And so the Packers have a very solid rush they have an elite rush defense to go with a very solid pass rush. So this really sets up a lot of opportunities for the Packers defense to force turnovers. I'm sure they'll get a lot of sacks as well. So even though they might give up 14 points or 17 points, or excuse me, like they could, they're projected to give up, I believe it's, somewhere around 23, 24 points. Even if they do that, they could very easily have a defensive touchdown. They could get several sacks, force several turnovers that are going to negate that. And if the Packers defense really does play above expectation and the Colts only score like 14 or 17 points, the Packers could easily have 15 to 20 fantasy points by the end of the day. So again, I know there's a low floor here because the Colts could score a lot through the air, but at the same time, it's just there's massive upside here. So I would consider rolling out the Packers in some GPP formats. So that is it for NFL Week 9. Thank you for watching, and please feel free to like and subscribe to our Twitch and YouTube channels here at Daily Fantasy Winners if you like these videos that Max and I and Danny continue to do. And of course, you can follow me at Nick Yuskevich on Twitter, and then Daily Fantasy Winners on Twitter at DFSnerd. All right, good luck, everyone.